I was on the road to Lichfield the other day and thinking we're often on the road to somewhere, whether that be literally or wanting to shift from a current state to a desired state. And sometimes it's as easy as typing the coordinates into your GPS. And other times the outcomes we wish to achieve require another level of thinking into why we want or need this outcome, how will we know when we have achieved it, and what prevents us from experiencing it now. Sometimes the gap is easy to close and sustain, and other times it involves a greater level of complexity, and therefore the need for more in-depth thinking, planning and action in order to get that sustainable long-term change. When we step back and look at where our ideas come from and how they create patterns of thinking, we begin to realise that there are different levels in awareness. Starting at the level of stimulus response, if we think about this from a learning perspective, this is where rote learning happens. 1 + 1 = 2. Stepping up a level, we have patterns of content. We call this applied learning. If you learn how to unlock a door, you can apply that to unlock other doors. Another level up is pattern of process. This is the world of accelerated learning. This is where we shift from just the content of what we are learning to the context in which an activity takes place. This is where we learn how to fish. Remember the saying, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, but teach him how to fish and he eats for a lifetime. The next level up is pure process of process. This is where generative learning comes into play, where we challenge our assumptions about the world and what we believe to be true. This is the world of identity, where we ask, who do I need to be? And from this perspective, we challenge our beliefs, develop our capabilities and behave to achieve the results in alignment with our desired outcomes. Too often we try and make change at the level of behaviour, yet if we want to achieve sustainable change, we need to start at the level of identity. If we think about maturity mapping and think about levels of improvement within our value chain, it would look something like react, maintain, improve, and transform. Now, no level is better than the other, but what's important is the awareness within those different levels. Our SOPs, our transaction guides for the different systems that we use, they slot in here and are important to ensure that we get accurate inputs and outputs within our process. But sometimes there is thinking that is needed to ensure that we get optimal outputs in alignment with our goals. So let's go through an example. Fleet at this point in time, and it may change in the future, but right now they're aiming to achieve 90,000 k's MKBF, so mean kilometres between failure. They've got standard operating procedures in play, they've got transaction guides, they've got the critical inputs to each step in the process to make sure that next step in the process is successful. But when it comes to maintaining the function of the asset and drawing the best value out of that asset, sometimes it's more than just following the standard. Sometimes there's another level of thinking that needs to come into play. I was out at Te Amutu with our Fleet Services Manager Ben Foote, and he gives us an example with a set of rotors.
So, at level 1 we've measured the rotors for wear. At level 2, the behaviour may well be that whilst the trailer is in here, I might as well replace the rotors. But when we step up to level 3, this is where a different level of thinking comes into play. Here you would start to look at the history of the trailer. Are there any wear trends for the brake rotors, and hence, what is the typical lifespan? Stepping up another level further, you would question how long is this asset going to be in service? What's the bigger picture of my asset? Do I need to replace the rotors at all? A set of rotors may last for over 4 years, and this trailer is retiring from the fleet in the next 6 months, hence the challenge of whether to replace the rotors at all. For Fleet Services, this is a challenge for our technicians to go from the behaviour of fixing our assets to the thinking of how we manage our assets.
The thing is, to get that thinking that drives that behaviour, we're actually asking for a shift in identity, because as we drive more value out of that asset, there's a possibility that the truck could fail. And the identity of an engineer who's very proud of the assets that he maintains comes into conflict with the thought that that truck could possibly be parked up on the side of the road because it's run to fail. So sometimes it's not about learning new behaviours, but rather becoming aware of our current thinking that drives behaviour, so that we can unlearn existing patterns. So it's critical that we give people the why we need to do this before we tell them what they need to do, and that we give them the bigger picture that drives that detail, and that we build the context into the content if we want to get that sustainable change.